being intersectional and being multicultural means that I am working with different models of communication, different models of time all the time. So it's, yes, linearity, but also concentric circles, but also a spiral, but also a zigzag.
Hey everyone, on this week's episode, I'm joined in the studio by the Fredericksburg, Virginia-based writer and culinary historian, Michael Twitty. I first came across Michael a few years ago in the Netflix docuseries High on the Hog, based on the book of the same name by Jessica B. Harris, who's also been a guest on the show, and I've been following his work ever since. Truth be told, it wasn't until preparing for this conversation, though, that I finally, at long last, read his incredible, metamorphic 2017 memoir, The Cooking Gene, A Journey Through African-American Culinary History. If you haven't read it yet, I urge you to get a copy of this book, which traces his ancestry, both black and white, through the lens of food, from Africa to America and slavery to freedom, and embraces the kind of nuanced, intersectional perspective that I feel far too often gets ignored or brushed over in today's increasingly polarized echo chamber times. As a queer, black, Southern Jewish cook, Michael is a walking embodiment of the word polyvocal, and his multi-layered cooking is a beautiful manifestation of this spirit. His latest book, Recipes from the American South, recently published by Phaidon, brings his skill as a home cook and historically informed recipe maker to the fore. But this is no typical or straightforward cookbook. Through Michael's deep culinary knowledge of the American South, ingredients and dishes transform into cultural and temporal touchpoints, portals into better understanding what makes the South the rich, distinctive melting pot it is. His dishes, rooted as they are in ancestry and memory, are a form of memorial making, and in their truest sense, living history. Or, as he has described them, and I love this term, edible antiques. On the episode, we get into Michael's understanding of time and temporality in the global African sense, which, in his view, eschews any notions of linearity, what getting to know his family history has taught him about Southern cooking, his grandfather, who lived to be 99 and, as a founding member of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, was a tireless activist for the rights of black farmers, food as a form of cultural reclamation and emotional healing, and kitchens as multi-purpose spaces to gather in community, to grieve and process trauma, to dance, to heal, to sing, to experience black love and joy, and to, of course, cook and share food. Before we get into the episode, I'd first like to thank our Season 12 presenting sponsor, the high jewelry maison Van Cleef & Arpels, which this year is collaborating with the American Museum of Natural History in New York to present the exhibition Cosmic Splendor, jewelry from the collections of Van Cleef & Arpels, an awe-inspiring assemblage of jewelry creations, timepieces, and precious objects with astronomical references from the Maison's patrimonial collection, as well as from private loans. From dramatic necklaces depicting rockets in flight, to gem-encrusted pendants inspired by distant nebulae, to watches with intricate mechanisms that trace the transit of planetary bodies. Cosmic Splendor features nearly 70 astrological, celestial, and mythological creations that celebrate the wonders and mysteries of the cosmos. Among the enchanting universe of pieces on display are a yellow gold and ruby moon pendant from 1969 that's a celebration of the Apollo 11 moon landing, a yellow gold zodiac bracelet from 1973, and 2021 double galaxies clips, characterized by their evocative swirling designs. These works trace the stylistic evolution and the level of expertise that the high jewelry maison, founded in Paris's Place Vendôme in 1906, has developed throughout its history. You can purchase admission tickets or learn more about Cosmic Splendor at amnh.org/exhibitions. That's amnh.org/exhibitions. And now, here's my conversation with Michael. Hi, Michael. Welcome to Time Sensitive.
Hi, Spencer. How are you?
Doing well. It's great to have you here in the studio. And I thought we'd begin naturally enough with the subject of time.
Sure.
And specifically how you think about time and temporality in the work you do as a chef, specifically as a historic chef, and as a living history interpreter. Do you often feel that in some sense you're living outside of time or across time?
I think both. It's important to understand time in the global African sense. People often joke about CPT, colored people's time, or African time. I think part of it is about natural rhythms, but it's also about the fact that we don't see time in a linear manner. And that's supposed to be some great, push forward for civilization for Westerners, linearity going forward. But I think that even people in Western culture are beginning to understand there's more than one way to look at time and interactions. So for me, that whole concentric circle model makes complete sense because I am both, as you said, inside and outside of the cycles of time. And being intersectional and being multicultural means that I am working with different models of communication, different models of time all the time. So it's, yes, linearity, but also concentric circles, but also a spiral, but also a zigzag. This temporal glossolalia that enables me to do my work better. For those of you, what is that big word he just used? Glossolalia is the same. It's basically talking in tongues. It's being multilingual. So we're talking about multi-temporal. Ooh, multi-temporal, I like that. It's the name of my new alternative band. But I mean, yeah, it's about all of that because you got to go into the mind, the heart, and the soul of your ancestors. And you also have to think about what's going to be, what the legacy is going to be for the future people you'll never meet. And also think about where you are right now. There really is no present. I don't think the present is an actual thing. I think it's always making the past or making the future. Now is a very difficult concept for me.
Yeah, I like this idea of temporal entanglement that Saadia Hartman has written a lot about. And we can't have a conversation talking about this temporal glossolalia without talking about the South. And how would you define time when it comes to the South? Like, you've written that the South might not be a place as much as a series of moments.
Yeah, and verbs and other good stuff. And that's not just clever play on words. It's really an understanding of who and where you are. I mean, Southerners who were raised with Southern fundamentalism and an evangelical spirit, the old school, not this new school, really did think of themselves as characters in the Bible. That's different from any other community that ever existed when it comes to that whole worldview. That enabled Zora Neale Hurston to write books about Moses and also products like The Eyes Are Watching God and Mules and Men, and because the people saw themselves in these archetypes that existed long before them and light years away from them in a spatial sense. So for Southern people, that sense of tradition, that sense of doing what one grandfather did and one grandmother did is far more important than laying down tracks for someone else, except when it comes to agrarian spirit, because we do plant our trees in a certain way. We do cultivate our land, our soil in a certain way. And that is important. But that's not everybody. That's not somebody living in uptown Charlotte. That's not somebody, living in Treme or the Fifth Ward of Houston. That is a very specific mentality that I've globbed onto. My grandfather, Gonsley Twitty of blessed memory, lived to be 99, was one of the founding members of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Saw the world in ways that I really admired and loved. What my father gave to me, what my grandparents gave to me. All those things are a very different, very specific way of looking at being Southern and holding dear those parts of the South that are about you, the land, the air, the water, nature, growing things, and being in connection with that. I mean, that's what I laud. I mean, there are other Souths, there are other mentalities, there are other ways of being, but for me, that is the penultimate.
And we kind of skipped over it, but like, how do you think about it from this historic chef perspective? Like, when you're placing yourself, you've called it like period drag, basically, and you are technically in the now, but also channeling the distant past.
Right. Because I'm not a reenactor. I'm not a first person interpreter. But at the same point in time, you have to think in two modes. One is contemporary, one is historical. So when I'm cooking on an open hearth, my mind has to shift from my cell phone, wherever it is, and digital to really, 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 really super analog. And what that means is, how much time is it going to take to cook? Gathering the wood, getting starting the fire, or if the fire's already there, what are you doing? Lining things up in my head. If I'm making a 6-7 course meal, which is half of what people would have if you were an elite planner, then how am I going to arrange that? Down to the last coal getting cold. You have to dress a certain way because not just for the illusion of the past, but also because modern clothes with all of our synthetic fibers burn in nasty ways with an open hearth fire. So that's also a good reason why you're much better off with linen and cotton and wool than you are with anything with a smidge of polyester, nylon, or any rayon. And you also have to think of, people ask you techniques. That's really crazy or if it's authentic. And I'm like, no, unless you have the exact weather conditions, like chemical, I'm not a scientist, but I know enough to know that the chemicals that we put in our air and our soil and our water are already a part of our bodies, unfortunately. Totally reconstruct everything. So no, that automatically means you're not going to be in the same culture space, physical space, taste space as the ancestors. You can approximate, but your goal really should be to experience. You get me? So because I think a lot of people think that, if I just follow the recipe, I'll be magically transported. But if you work through it enough times and you feel through it, and you cook with certain conditions, and you also try to line up other factors, you might just have a very accurate approximation. What happens is you start to feel and see what they felt. And I don't mean so this is not magical. This is basically going, oh, now I get it. When they said this or made this note or talked about this, or someone said in an oral history interview, okay, now we get each other. And all of a sudden you are in fingertip reach of the spirits of the dead, or of the ones who are old enough to remember the way things once were. Why is this important for me? Because I am African American, and I think people are kind of used to us being amnesia Americans. And that's only because they know the value of oral history. They know the value of oral history to us, oral and oral, to say it, but also to hear it, to come from a generation where you saw and you heard before you read and you wrote. So for us, recapturing that is a huge, not only cultural healing, but a mental health healing, because it gives us that kind of connection that we supposedly lost, in many cases did lose, but can recover, but through these sensory and sensual actions that give us something closer to what we were than what we have.
Well, and I think it's interesting. We talk about antiques or things from the past, these physical objects, but so many of them, especially in the African American community, were decimated or destroyed. Of course, there are some incredible artifacts in the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, but those are sort of the preeminent examples of what remains. What you're doing, you've described as edible antiques. And I love that. I love this idea of being able to create some semblance of something that's antique
Mm-hmm.
through something that's still very much like, present through food. I've never never thought about food as an antique other than when we see like heirloom tomato, right?
Yeah, and that's fine too. And that's one part of it. Also heirloom flavors and heirloom apples. And we can keep going through all the different pieces. But if you put them all together, something special happens. I never really felt as though I was competent to be anything in my own time. And so for me, that kind of, edible antique vibe gives me access to something I know and I can feel and I can approach. I got really tired as a nerd of interfacing with people who really got an attitude. If you start to have intellectual curiosity and they'd pushed back and basically let you know in a million ways Sunday, you don't know shit. You don't really know anything. You don't know as much as I know. So I said, fine. I'm going to chill out here with these ancestors. And I didn't do it because I wanted to be them. I wanted to be the person who said, you don't know what I know. I wanted to open up a conversation and a feeling and a world. And I knew that in many ways I couldn't do that otherwise. And also there's the stigma about blackness. To be black and to be the other is to be cool, to be fun, tantalizing, interesting. So I remembered the story about Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox and the Briar Patch. I think of myself as dwelling in the Briar Patch. Like, there's too many thorns for y'all to hurt me. The vulnerable, I appreciate it. What is it about koalas and eucalyptus leaves and something? I don't know, some kind of weird factoid I learned through Instagram or TikTok or something. But it was just like, yeah, I eat eucalyptus leaves. And no, my digestive system is not great, thanks God. But, I can do this because I'm in this unique environment and I'm acclimated to where I'm at. And that's how I like to feel about this history and this food and this culture, is because it gives me what other kids say, a safe space. It gives me a place where I feel comfortable, where I can apprehend and control things and don't get, mowed over by people who just want to let me know how uncool I am. No, for me, this is the root of blackness. Africa to America, enslavement to emancipation, and then from emancipation to transcendence. This is where I find my power. But also my sources, my board of directors, my ancestors never keep me busy. So it all works out in the end.
Yeah. And you said, food is your flag. Food is the thing that connects to everything else for you. When it comes to time and cooking, I wanted to bring up music.
Sure.
You've described the culinary accomplishments of African Americans as edible jazz. And
the improvisation.
Yeah.
The fun of it, the also just like sometimes jazz is a way to work out your frustrations.
And you've noted that you have to know a lot of songs to cook the way your ancestors cooked. You call them like clocks with spells. And I love this idea of like, yes, you're cooking with ingredients, but you're also cooking with time. And when you don't have a clock, what is your clock? It's a song. Could you speak a bit to that? Because I don't think a lot of people understand or even know that history.
So a couple of years ago, I'm randomly watching an episode. I don't faithfully watch anything of Master Chef or something like that. And Gordon Ramsay is like, wow, this chef was challenged because they all had a mess up. And so they were like, okay, do this egg thing to kind of keep yourself in good graces and stay in the competition as a queer black chef from Mississippi, home cook from Mississippi. And they were like, how did you do that omelet right and do this? He said, my grandmother taught me to sing Amazing Grace. And she said, sing it twice and you'll have it. And what got me about that was I hadn't written a whole ton about that at that point. But the bottom line is that's still a custom that persists among some people. First of all, Amazing Grace, ladies and gentlemen, is not 2 minutes. The real Amazing Grace is like 20 minutes How? Because you had to repeat all them stanzas. It's like 20 stanzas. It might even be longer than that. Who knows? But I know this much. The real Amazing Grace is not short, it's long. And so, I'll do that in my head often. It's just, how long does it take to sing a song? Now, we're not talking about, pop song. We're talking about sacred songs, work songs. They were timers. They weren't just, things people did to pass the time. And what I love about Black people is that we work at play and play at work. I'm serious about this game. I'm serious about the dominoes. I'm serious about basketball. I'm serious about a trivia game. I'm working at play. On the other hand, you see, in Africa, I've been to West Africa 8 times. You see people work, and there's the song and then the hand and the whole, bridge between them. And here you are watching these people do the thing and sort of like every now and then smile and jiggle and dance. It's not this Western way of just like you're at work. It's very dramatic, right? No, it's I am playing at work, because work can be drudgery and work can be exhausting. They in those fields, and they got the dude with the drums or the guy on the stringed instrument, and 20, just a couple of minutes, and you see this field of grass go to half cut down because everybody's working in the line and it's dancing. They're dancing with it and they're having fun at it. And then they're swinging the tools around, and when the tools are supposed to hit, they hit and they cut. And you can just see the land get sculpted with every single swing, and they're just having a blast. And so when we play at work, sometimes that play isn't necessarily like fun play. It's more like, can I line all of my rhythms up? Yeah, and then on top of that edible jazz aspect is just the improv. It's the flourishes. It's the repetitions for the sake of intensity. The aesthetics do kind of have you can line them up and say, oh, wow, I see in cooking what somebody else sees in a quilt. Somebody might go, well, what do you mean by a quilt? Our quilts tend to be, the colors and the patterns are not strict. The lines are not strict. In fact, that's a very important part of the Black quilting tradition, is that much like in West African strip cloth, you'll notice in strip cloth, the lines aren't lined up. They're kind of offbeat phrasing, right? And so you kind of you can work with food, but you also have to understand language. You got to go into fabric arts. You got to go into music and dance. And then you start to pull out these aesthetic principles and ideas. And then you kind of mix it, put it in a jar, mix it all up, put it on the table, and see that there is a consistency between all those different parts. And if you don't understand how time works, again, we talked about how there's linear Western time against these sort of like circles of time, circularity. And that's important because that's what it means to be an African American. And even I would dare say, an African in the diaspora in the Atlantic world. We are a different people. On our best circumstances, we are a rooted people. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. In the same way that our cousins on the continent are becoming the journey we've already gone through, which is lining up these multiple sources of self into something that is functional and works for us in this modern world. And so now all of us are on the same kind of like time play where we're both acknowledging our ancientness and at the same time confronting the fact that we are in a world that is fast paced, that moves in a second. Nobody has cell phones like Africans. Okay? Because it's communication, relationship to your family and your relatives, all that is summed up in one technological device. One that we didn't have. We had our talking drums. We had our secret code languages. People don't even understand. They used to joke about, Snoop Dogg, right? And it's not a joke. That's actually a code language. It's Black Pig Latin. And it has different dialects. It's not just one thing. They had to send cops to learn the different dialects of this stuff. And my point is that the intricacy of our culture and how we've manifested is so brilliant. I don't think anybody can completely appreciate it. So when you hear about the people singing the lullabies or the work songs or the spirituals or gospel songs, or even someone make a playlist, right? That's just an update of something that's been going on for a very long time.
I mean, I love this. I've often framed like the cell phone, the ancient cell phone is like the Paleolithic hand axe, but I also love the talking drum. I love this idea of the talking drum being like the original, phone.
Mm-hmm. When you go to Africa and you see how it's done, it's wild. And I noticed third or fourth trip, I was like, oh, and everybody's talking drums sounds like them, but also there are other musical parts of the language. So when you hear like Wolof, it sounds like Sabar. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Nyangadef. Mangferek. When you hear Yoruba, it sounds like they're talking dundun, talking drums. They call it dundun, which is automatopoeia. And it's like, okay, so it's kilo she, ashe, on lo de, which means I'm cool. So Baba is I'm cool. I'm all right. Ba wunianka, on lo de, dun 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 dun, right? As opposed to Akan, Ashanti, Fanti. Their drums completely different. Dun 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 dun. And less tonal, but absolutely the bass, the sound. Santewa. Dun 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 dun. And so not being a musicologist, but being somebody who feels it in his gut, right? That taught me a lot. Also taught me how much, despite the fact that I cling to the things we've retained and morphed and developed, also how much we've lost. I don't think anybody can appreciate. Those recipes were originally said in Songo and Mbundu and Sundi and Ga and Hausa. There's a lot in the language. Languages are powerful. Languages also, one thing to think about all the time, Spencer, is how words, how we say, like, for example, us English speakers, well, sometimes we're right, have a very efficient language versus French. Sorry, French speakers. And it just seems to go on forever. Or in Spanish, like, how many words do you need? Or in German, okay, let's be efficient, but let's make these crazy words that have 50 letters in them to express one emotion or whatever. Versus when I speak AAVE, African American Vernacular English. Oh, look at the knee baby. Knee baby. Yes. We're talking about a specific type of toddler and where they are in life. Or, back in old Gullah speak. Day clean. I love the words day clean. Right? And it comes in Sierra Leone, they say dokle. And then you go up and down the coast. It's literally translation of, the dawn is here, so the day is fresh and clean. What an incredible way. Instead of morning, you don't think about what the word morning means. But when you hear day clean, there's something about that. That lines up spiritually. It lines up philosophically. And so that's why I love this. I can't get enough of it. And I'm also a Jew, right? That's not my religion. It's my religion, my peoplehood as well. I'm a Southerner. I'm a queer man. I'm gay. I'm a struggling he, him. Or should I say recovering he, him. And so I now have to line all that stuff up to like, it's fun and exhausting.
Well, and you're a Gullah Geechee descendant. So
I'm a Gullah Geechee descendant. Yeah, that's right. I'm an Afro-Latino descendant. And I got everything but Creole. Oh, God, I wish I was part Creole. I think that Louisiana black culture is the stuff. But I guess I'm kind of grandfathered into it. I guess that's how it works.
Honorary.
Honorary. Yes. I'm an honorary.
Hey everyone, taking a quick break here to tell you a little bit about our Season 12 presenting sponsor, the high jewelry maison Van Cleef & Arpels, which this year is collaborating with the American Museum of Natural History in New York to present the exhibition Cosmic Splendor, jewelry from the collections of Van Cleef and Arpels. An awe-inspiring assemblage of dozens of jewelry creations, timepieces, and precious objects with astronomical references. Featuring nearly 70 celestial, mythological, and astrological jewelry creations that celebrate the wonders and mysteries of the cosmos, the exhibition presents an enchanting universe of jewelry from the Mason's patrimonial collection, as well as contemporary creations, some of them on loan from private collections. You could purchase admission tickets or learn more about Cosmic Splendor at amnh.org/exhibitions. That's amnh.org/exhibitions. And now, back to the episode. Well, so much of what we're talking about connects to memory. You've described memory as the most indispensable ingredient. And I wanted to ask about that. Like, how do you think this notion of memory as ingredient comes alive or is incorporated into your cooking?
You know, there's things that you haven't made in a while because of nostalgia and emotions. And so I decided one day I really wanted some tuna salad. Simple enough, right? But then I was just like, let me look some things up and kind of, then something's told me, no, just remember. Let your mom in. All of a sudden, where's your lemon juice? Where's the garlic powder? Okay. No, that relish, not that relish. Okay. No, the table grind, the coarse grind pepper. That'll work better. And it was wild. I even immediately started Instagramming about it, how I felt like I was channeling. Maybe I was just unlocking it. You know, they say we don't really forget anything or that things don't really leave our brains. So maybe I was just unlocking that door. Sometimes the memory is blood memory. White folks don't like blood memory. I wouldn't, if I was a white person interfacing with black people, I wouldn't like blood memory either. It's fascinating, and it's part of those double standards. It's fascinating to me that people talk to people who survived the Shoah, the Holocaust, and they have no problem talking about trauma and DNA and things being passed down very quickly and other stuff. But when it comes to black folks, they're like, oh no, y'all are full of shit. No, no. I'm saying that somebody who's black and who's Jewish and who's queer and has these multiple levels of connection. And I just tell people, no, if it's good for one group, it's good for the other group. Blood memory in black people is real. Yes, I know it might be very scary if you have exploitative advances towards my people and my community, that there's a part of us that our antenna, we call the antenna, that goes off when we know some trouble's about to go in, or something nasty's about to happen, or that someone is saying something that we don't, the vibe we don't like, creating a situation we don't like. We know that. So blood memory is real. Blood memory is why we have OCD about, when I say that with deep respect, about certain practices we have even in cooking. The washing, people are like, oh, why do you wash everything? You wash the chicken and the meat. I said, because we know better. Oh, no, community, I'm so sorry. But if you wash that, you're going to spread more germs around. Shut up. Give me my bowl. Give me my chicken. Give me my limes and my lemons and my vinegar and my salt. I'm going to wash my meat off. Thank you so much. Because where we're from, nobody had a salmonella because we cleaned our stuff off. All of our pots and pans were immaculate. They might have been half rusty, but they were immaculate. You feel me? So blood memory is really important. And if I was outside of who I am and I didn't feel like I didn't have that connection, I'd be scared of that too, because what it does is, wow, these people have a almost magical relationship with a tip off in their system that says, I'm about to do something that's not cool. That would scare me too. And I would deny it too, you know? So blood memory is really important, on top of just channeling our nostalgia, channeling our best memories, and also thinking about scanning what we saw in our brains.
Yeah, it's almost a form of ancestral recall. It's like,
Yeah, I like that. Ancestral recall. Exactly.
and you write in The Cooking Gene about kitchens and both their role as like a form of power, a form of escape in a way, but then also kind of the place where some of the worst things happen to enslave people.
That's right. You know, the kitchen in my own time and before was where specific conversations happened. Hair was done. Black households, the kitchens where hair is often done, especially for our sisters. Our kids, you know, haircuts. It's also a place where, you know, like every other American family, we talk about bills. We talk about relationship matters. We talk about homework. We talk about, you know, in our community, our lynching stories, the bad things that happen to us in the day, the venting. I think what white people in general think about it is like, oh, they go home and what's what Whitey did to me today? That's so funny to me, Whitey. But this attitude of just like blaming everybody else for your problems. No, it's a place of self-doubt. It's a place of healing that self-doubt and other energy. And yeah, I remember vividly father, uncle, aunt, these long moment. You're sitting in the background as a child because, you know, you were supposed to be seen but not heard. And you're sitting in the background hearing them tell these awful stories about how they were treated. And some small part of you understood that was going to be you one day. But they were alive. They didn't hurt nobody. They didn't let nobody hurt them as best they could. But it was also where I learned about my family history and my, you know, stories. And it wasn't like Hallmark. It was very much like, Grammy, why do you do that? Oh, because my daddy, da-da-da-da-da, and the story would come out. And then one day she was like, yeah, you're my father. You're my father, come back to me. Which, if you know West African culture, that's a very common idea of the ancestor being reborn into their lineage, you know, with a new ego. And then, of course, the kitchen is where you dance, you know, dance with mama and daddy. It's the place where Luther Vandross sang about, you know, his father coming home, giving his mom a smooch. That's a really important and a precious and important memory. Black love, black joy, or just, you know, it's where our friends who weren't black got used to our cooking, introduced to our cooking and our food. They were always welcome at our kitchen table. I can't always say about the reverse, but they were always welcome at our table. They needed dinner. They got dinner. Okay? Nobody came over and did a project or school or homework without getting fed. And it's also the place people grieve, where the food comes in during the funeral, when nobody's cooking. If your family and friends are bringing potluck things, and the kitchen piles up with aluminum pans, and, you know. So where I wrote, it's where my mother taught me. My mother was my best culinary teacher. She'd teach me all the culinary terms and stuff and have me sit down and write things. And yeah, I remember that god-awful, waxy tablecloth we had. It wasn't red and white, but it was, you know, kind of like thrifted, thrown out, but it was ours until it fell apart. And it covered our little table that we found. And that's the thing about it is I don't even think about that, you know. I don't even think about the fact that there were lots of aspects of my life that were covered so that we could do other things. You know, nobody went to IKEA and bought the table. There was a table, it was thrown out by people and was on the curb. We brought it in the house. And there was our table until it wasn't. You know what I'm saying? So that's one aspect of space. So the kitchen in antebellum times and colonial times is a little different. It's a little scarier. Now, on the one hand, it was a refuge because typically the kitchens were not attached to the same building. That's not always the case. But when it was a detached building, it could be very grand, it could be very small. Our people often slept upstairs, which probably was a little hutch, a little attic, a storage area. You know, that was better than having a dirt cabin that you had to share with 15 other people. At the same point in time, some of those kitchens were spaces of a sexual assault. of violence. I think in the Cooking Gene, I talk about how in the course of many years of research, I would often see these things, particularly in the Caribbean. You know, like one slave owning mistress who has like a terrifying, wicked grin on her face. And she's like, oh, I'm better now. And the guest basically says, well, what went down? And she takes him to the oven. She's rich enough to have a bake oven. She took the cook in there alive. But had other enslaved people do it on pain of death. Can you imagine it? Being forced to murder your friend, your family. And then she said it calmly. He said she said it calmly, like in the most psychopathic way. And it's just like, well, this doesn't make me feel happy and joyful and celebrate the joys of the kitchen. This is scary. This is scary. You talk about time. I realized something that this work does for me and other things. My mom, a blessed memory, got very ill and chronic. And I remember my mom saying to me one time when she was in between states, talking about how my grandfather, who could be really grumpy and nasty, was harassing her because of her health. And I'm like, this tracks. But she said to me that I came to the rescue. But I'm like, I did? She's like, yeah, little boy, you. And it was the first time I realized that it's very possible that in the spiritual realm, our multiple selves are still running around. Teenage you, old man you is probably already here, right? Baby you. Mm-hmm. You know, just like, and they're all doing their thing. And that gave me the chills because I realized I had felt that. I'd felt the presence of little me, puberty me, etc. You know what I'm saying? Still out there somewhere, you know, doing our thing. And so if that's the case, right, and our ancestors are real, and they play a role in, if we say, in African civilization and beyond, then we've really got to kind of wrap our hand and take by the horns this existence that we have. So to be in those kitchen spaces where I came out, right, I talk about that in the book, but also where I recognize that I got these straight hairs in my arms and I got this color. That's a lot to have to take in and be vulnerable about. I just want people to understand as they're hearing this, just how much it takes to do all this and still keep a straight face and walk calmly down the street and go about your life with this baggage that if I give it up, I'm no longer myself.
Do you see the research, I suppose, on some level? I mean, you've described that as being a way of channeling the grief in a way. The research specifically into your family, the DNA research, the genealogy, you'll never uncover the full truth, as you've pointed out. It's like a mosaic or like the kintsugi of the pot type of thing. Like the pot's broken, you got to patch it back together.
I am so impressed. You've read this better with more attention than anybody else I've ever spoken to. Wow. I'm like, I've forgotten I've written some of this stuff.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's so much in that book that speaks to the work that you've done. Processing what is no doubt a really complicated history to process. Mm-hmm. We haven't mentioned it yet, but you're quarter white also, like in your lineage? About
almost. Yep. About, I think when we got down to brass tacks, about a fifth. Yeah. Fifth to a quarter. It depends on which test you look at.
Yeah.
And European. Whiteness like blackness is more of a, I mean, it sounds cliche now, social construct, because I don't have any of the benefits or privileges of being a white person. But it's unquestionable that, you know, I'm like between a fifth and a quarter European. What's wild is that when you leap over that antebellum wall, colonial wall.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean by it. I went to Denmark as a guest of Renee Redzepi for the Mad Symposium. And I was able to go to the National Museum. They so happened to have an exhibit about Vikings. So many times I've been to African art museums and before I knew a thing and felt like I'm like, wandering around like, kind of like doing a fake Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost and trying to see if I can feel my way through it. And sometimes it actually did pan out. It's weird. It's really weird. And then I'm in this European museum, these European historical figures, and the exhibit was very dark. And I don't know why, I just felt very cold and very dark. And I'm looking around and I'm acknowledging to myself that somewhere, somehow among these artifacts is something that hands that were in my lineage touched. It's a very bizarre feeling. And that these were not the white people who, beat us and sold us and made us work in their field. These are the white people who didn't even know they were white, who tramped across Europe and did their thing and sold things and fought and enslaved other people and thought that, dying in battle was the fastest way to heaven, their concept of heaven. And the consistent message in my brain, in my heart, as I went through this exhibit was, these are your people too. When I was in third grade, I said to my third grade teacher, Mrs. Philippin, she would play classical musicians every morning. And one morning she played Edvard Grieg. And I said, quick as a flash, Mrs. Philippin, I'm part Norwegian. To which she goes, well, that's very nice. Thank you for your contribution. And then many years later, and then telling my parents, we're from Norway. Ha ha, no, we're not. And then when I get my first big DNA test, my largest European DNA comes from Scandinavia.
Yeah, Finland.
But also Norway, Sweden, Iceland. There's even a small part of me that's Iceland, Norway, 1%, but that's very specific. But the rest of it's generic Scandinavia. Because, they went to England, they went to Ireland. They spread their DNA, right? They forced these women to marry them. They had children, they had settlements. Why is that not my history? I may not be one of the Olsen family from Little House on the Prairie, but it doesn't mean that those things aren't present in my life and my history. We say right now the word timelines. So we need to get used to white people having African people as part of their timeline and black people having Europeans, particularly Northern Europeans, as part of their timeline. This is what makes us up. We couldn't be exactly the mixture and what we are. And I'm not obsessed with genes and blood no, because that's somebody else's story. That's that old school, racial purity nonsense. I'm talking about what it means to be a human. Mm-hmm.
There's a quote I wanted to mention here that I'm going to pull from The Cooking Gene. I want to bring it up because it feels as relevant now as ever. We can choose to acknowledge the presence of history, economics, class, cultural forces, and the idea of race in shaping our experiences, or we can languish in circuitous arguments over what it all means and get nowhere. I present, and you're writing this in The Cooking Gene in the context of why you're writing the book. You write, I present my journey to you as a means out of the whirlwind and attempt to tell as much as time will allow. And I was thinking about that. I mean, you wrote this, about 10 years ago, coming up on it anyway. Mm-hmm. What does that bring to mind for you in this moment or confluence of time, let's call it?
People are addicted to the whirlwind. On one end, I call it the racialist hamster wheel. And we're not free of it either. Listen, we're still talking about colorism in a non-constructive way. We know it exists. We know it's been part of us. But now we're finding ways to morph into new things so we can stay titillated by colorism. Colorism, y'all, is particularly when different shades of black become weaponized against each other. Notice I didn't just say light-skinned people. Notice I didn't just say dark-skinned people. Notice I say people in the middle and in between. I'm talking about, that kind of thing about who gets to be really black, authentically black, who gets to have the power and the privilege, depending upon what. And for the most part in America, it's been people who didn't quite pass, but held that hierarchy over others. We're still in the hamster wheel of racism and racialism. You can't say a single thing without somebody, throwing that verbal, intellectual Molotov cocktail at you. Well, it was, okay, so let me get down to one moment during this whole regime situation. It was someone who had an Asian phenotype, but grew up in the South, but commenting on something on social media, and someone basically going back to your country, hey, making fun of the way that they thought that person spoke, because they were commenting on Jeff Sessions or somebody else. And they said they took it personally, like, how dare you make fun of me as a Southern white man, you Asian whatever. Turns out that Asian person is 3 generations in the South, born and raised in the Deep South, and has learned to speak English in a way that most Southerners, particularly white Southerners, would completely understand. But people love to throw insults. They love to stay stuck in the past. And that's what it's very funny to me, is he's stuck in the past. But I'm not stuck in the past. The past for me is a vehicle, is a tool. It's a masquerade. It's all those things. But I'm not sitting across from you at this situation going, hey, colonist, hey, slaveholder, hey, whatever. No, it's unnecessary. Unless you act that way. And then we have a problem. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. It's not being a white person. It's not being of European descent. It's replicating the mistakes of the past, because they give you the dopamine of having privilege and power. If you have that dopamine part of you from that racialism, then all bets are off. I'm not talking to a friend. I'm not talking to a good person. I'm not talking to someone who actually knows and understands that if you bring that nonsense back up, it's a weapon, it's a tool, it's scary, because it's like going to the Museum of Natural History and going to the Melanesian part of the exhibit and seeing all these incredibly beautiful but scary looking clubs and swords, right? Because they have shark's teeth on them. And it's like, you ain't making it out alive with that thing. And it's what people do. I don't feel particularly powerful, so I'm going to resurrect some 1840 nonsense so I can hurt you. That's not Christian. That's not holy. Why does it have to be Christian? I'm not Christian. But the whole idea of Christian is supposed to be the holy, the religious. It's not nice. It's not cool. I don't like that hamster wheel. I spent a lot of money, a lot of time, so I could know so I would never look in the eyes of any person and ever be able to not say, with confidence, I know this about me. I don't know every ancestor. I would love to. I would love to be able to know every ancestor's name, where they came from, and their story and their journey and complete different parts of the mosaic. It'll never happen. And I got to be okay with that. But if I know what I know now, sir, after my journeys, after all I've done, what I know now is far more than the past 6 generations have been privy to. And I am so grateful that I feel I've restored in that. So when I started to work on recipes for the American South, I noticed something. I noticed that I had never given myself the chance to understand my worth as an independent scholar and my worth as a writer. Because here I am going, oh, but this person did this and that person did this. Like, hold up, bruh. You have been to the UK now 6 times. You've been to Ireland. You have been to France multiple times. You have been to Scandinavia. You have been to Italy. You've been to Germanic Europe. You have a lot of learning under your belt. You've done this work. Anybody who goes in a 2-3 hour train out to Somerset from London is doing the damn work, right? And then you go to West Africa and you do the thing and you start doing culinary tours there and all this stuff. And then you're like, oh. And then you know you've been all around the South because of the Southern Discomfort Tour, which led to the cooking gene. And like, oh. And it's like, I never gave myself the credit.
Right.
That I did the work that one needs to do to truly say, I love this with all of my heart. And I want you to understand where we come from and who we are.
Yeah, it's not about being stuck in the past. It's about respect for the past. And I wanted to ask, because like, it feels like this whirlpool. How the hell do we get out of it? And one way that seems to me to be like a way forward that would make sense. Not that, I mean, it's a bit of a pipe dream because I have no idea how every living person would do this, or every living American anyway. I guess to reframe it, if I were to ask you as a question, in what ways do you think the world or America would be different if we all paid more attention to the past, our pasts,
right,
and spent more time with our ancestors? Like if we did the work you did to know who we are, where we come from, then we might have a better idea of where we're going and not be stuck in this whirlpool.
Right. Because we're at that point, if the first thing is put yourself under the microscope.
Yeah.
Why do I believe the things I believe? Why do I think the way I think? Why do I see certain things? Why have I had certain issues? For a lot of us, it's the self-doubt, there's imposter syndrome. There is, am I smart enough? Am I beautiful enough? Also, knowing our neighbors and knowing other cultures that are around us. I mean, you're a New Yorker. You live around hundreds of different cultures. And if you can intimately approach them, then also helps you see yourself, because there's certain things you'll say automatically are universals. And there's certain things that you'll see that are just not, but help you understand your gestalt a lot better, your worldview a lot better. You get out of it because you want to. You have to first of all say, I don't like this anymore. I don't like these chains. They don't fit me. I hate these chains. They're heavy. They don't fit me. And I can take them off any time I want. And I can really understand who I am and where I'm going and what I need to do. And also understand like the things that my ancestors were not able to fix or help or heal. One for me is that a lot of times they're health struggles. Doesn't have to be my destiny. I can change behaviors, diet, other stuff. Another thing is just things I know people have held on to. There's certain traumas in my family I know have been there for quite some time. Very specific trauma, not just generic, like very specific stuff. So how do I get up from underneath that? Also, they're good role models, the ancestors, for joy and happiness and discovering yourself. Oh, they did that. And that like, for example, my great-grandfather, maternal grandmother's father, they didn't have a lot, but my great-grandfather, he used to build trucks and toys for his kids and stilts and other things, and he never laid a hand on them. He fake beat them, right? And he never laid a hand on them. He had real joy in watching his wife feel safe and protected. He felt real joy in watching his children play. He felt real joy in reprogramming his children to be like, yeah, I know you don't like doing this work, but let daddy see you smile. He was really good at that. And he was also very proud and very strong and very brave. And so when my grandmother was like, yeah, she'd say, all right, Joe Todd. That didn't make me cry until years later when I really understood what she was saying. I really understood that she was like, you're the best parts of my daddy. And I'm seeing that live on. That's when I understood how deep that was. She used to tell me all the time. And when they told you something more than once, they meant for you to memorize it. And she said, it was many a night when my daddy wouldn't eat so we could eat. And they would sit up there with a glass of tea. Say, Mother, let's have tea. That meant this is the Depression. We ain't eating, but our children will eat grits and gravy because we can't. And because they didn't eat one night a week, I'm here talking to you right now. And they don't have to be black to have that story. I know many people, Italian American, Jewish American, on, who have those survival stories. And their parents didn't do it because social pressure, did it because they out of complete and utter unconditional love. You can rediscover the unconditional love in your family despite your traumas, despite your dysfunctions. You can rediscover so many good and positive and powerful, loving things between all these other detritus that you figure out. And that's what it's all about. I mean, when I first started working on this many, many moons ago, I remember this young man who was Neapolitan heritage from Italy, from Eastern Pennsylvania. And he'd read about me, and he came up to me after a college presentation, and he said, I want you to know in 2 days from now, I'm leaving for Italy. And I'm going to go try to discover what you discovered. I want that. I want to be in conversation with my roots. And I think what you're doing is great. And I think I'm going to go do it. So for me, that was incredible because he did not see the boundaries in my phenotype, my history. What he saw was, I like that. That's what I want and I need.
This is the way out of the whirlpool.
That's the way out of the whirlpool, right? It's like I'm not swirling around no more. So I grabbed the stick.
Yeah.
I fought my way out. Now I'm trying to get dry. It's going to be great when I finally get dry and I can tell people about how I escaped the whirlpool.
All right. Well, we have to switch to your cookbook. You have a cookbook out. It's called Recipes from the American South. And in it, actually, in the beginning of it, you write about time. So I wanted to bring that up. You note, the best thing we can do is appreciate the layers of time, people's stories, and meaning more than the grocery list of Southern ingredients. Instead, we should ask why. The why leads into the future, which is really what we're talking about right now. I mean, that why was sort of like, well, I want to find out about where I come from, why I'm here, how I'm here. Follow the trail. Could you just share a bit about what you've learned about time or time kind of as this layer cake, I guess, by asking the why and how it ultimately led to this cookbook?
So Emily Takutis, one of the main editors at Fightin', asked me to find someone who would be willing to do this cookbook. I couldn't. Then it was find a partner. I couldn't. So then it became, you, of course, which is, grateful that she thought of me that way. But also understanding how volatile our timelines have been. But also the pressure to erase my people. And also the pressure to erase anything that didn't make us reflect. Do you know what? Now that I think about it, between our metaphors, I'm really thinking about it like, okay, so somebody doesn't want us to get out of the whirlpool because it doesn't benefit them to do that, right? So working on this, I knew I was writing a thesis with recipes. And I also understood that I wanted to make sure that, despite the fact that we're not published by the same person, that the Cooking Gene, Rice, the Kosher Soul, and Recipes from the American South were different ways of telling a very similar story about Southern food through my particular lens and my particular way of looking at the world. Now I have this big book that you can knock on. You can literally hear that when you knock on the cover, with these raised appliques kind of like designs, Southern vegetables. And Southern isn't technique. Southern isn't the ingredients. Southern is the spirit behind it, the mentality. And I wanted people to understand that the historical context is important, but also the contemporary context. I mean, I don't let people forget about fast food. I don't let people forget about church cookbooks, websites, Southern Living, Ladies' Home Journal. I don't let people forget about civil rights protests. I don't like people forget about none of that because those are all contributors to the river, the flow of this food way, right? And Southern food is not a monolith, and Southern food is seasonal, which is another part of time, right? And it disappoints you every year, and it makes you thrilled every year. This year, I don't know, over 1,000 tomatoes, but also, almost no fish peppers. Damn, I gotta wait another year to see this cycle through and get all the things I want and know that one thing ain't gonna work. Well, that's part of it. I mean, that is part of the make do of the Southern Kitchen is that, whoops, it didn't work out this year, maybe next year.
Yeah, the garden is like central.
Yeah, and then the fact that you got to save seeds and then you create those edible antiques to what you managed to save. It's a whole system. It's a whole way of looking at the world. My grandfather loved yellow watermelon. I have a picture of me when I was 6 or 7 with granddaddy in the field with his tractor, picking one of them yellow watermelons in South Carolina. And I'm so grateful for that because that is memory, that is nostalgia, that is taste and taste memory and taste sense. Does someone from New England really reflect on like the nature of their food being, a little Puritan, a little indigenous? No, not always. Or Midwestern. Not one Midwesterner has ever told me that hot dish is descendant of like the things that they eat for smorgasbord. And it is. It is. But I've never heard anyone talk about that history and heritage. In the West Coast, Asian Pacific Rim and Frontera food, but borderland food, people don't have that sort of like historical cultural reverence. But in the South, you often do, or you can.
And your practice or your work really is like giving credence to your ancestors in a lot of ways. Credit and credence.
Because I have to. In the African tradition, spiritual tradition, you have pour libation. And you also don't do anything, make any decision without addressing the spirit world. And for me, that's a big part of my work. You got to be in touch with that. The best artists in that African spiritual tradition are the people who truly know how to lift that veil. I was thrilled when Ryan Coogler put out Sinners because the word veil is not in my vocabulary, but when I saw that several times in the theater, and I was like, of course, that's what we've always done. That's what I do in the open hearth on an old plantation. I'm just lifting a veil so that energy can pour through. It's an amazing, fascinating feeling when you understand that there's no border between you and the other side. You can make magic happen with that food or with that music, with your words, etc.
Hey everyone, taking another quick break here to tell you about our weekly newsletter, where I share a behind-the-scenes look into each time-sensitive episode, and where we also get into various things in the cultural sphere our team at The Slowdown is paying attention to. You can sign up and join our thousands of other subscribers by going to slowdown.media/newsletter. That's slowdown.media/newsletter. And now, back to the episode. Where do you think this came from, this fascination with historic cooking? Because you wanted to become a historic cook at age 7. Like, seems like an unusual thing to have, like, as a childhood dream. Like, you don't hear your average 7-year-old being like, I want to be a historic chef. Did you ever imagine one day that you'd be cooking at, like, Colonial Williamsburg or Monticello? I mean,
no.
You are someone who can wholeheartedly say you're now living your childhood dream.
Yeah, I mean, I remember telling my mother and father, when I grow up, I want to be a chef, a teacher, a writer, and a preacher. I was 7. People in high school, in the middle school, when my grandmother passed, they didn't know where I was. What happened to Mike Twitty? Oh, he finally went to Africa. My whole life, I'm going to write that book. I'm going to write a book. My grandmother, 11 years old, Grammy, I'm going to write a book about the whole South. And just so happens that it was published in the year that would have been her 100th birthday year. It's terrifying to understand that we have a lot of personal agency and choices in how we design our world and curate our world through our thoughts. But it's also terrifying to understand that not everybody has that. Some cell phones, to use this analogy, some cell phones are plugged into the wall and they keep charging. You feel me? And others just don't. Some people are charged and some people ain't. Some people, that's not for them. They don't want to see that. I really do people get what they want. This is going to sound really out there, but I think some people, if they want that unattached, uncharged life, they get it. There's no sadness. There's no whatever. It's just, that's not their thing. They're here. They live. They pass through. And it's like this. Others of us, it's like we wake up again. I'm one of those people. It's not an easy life. But I know that the things that have happened to me through this point have not been an accident. And that can be very daunting. And sometimes we go, look at that and go, well, damn, I would have chose, but no, you didn't. And it's funny, in Kabbalah and in Jewish mysticism and in Yoruba spirituality, among other traditions, there is the stalwart belief that we choose our path in heaven. I'll take the, unwed couple, black. Usually you want black? Yeah, black. And I want this, and I want these struggles, and I want, abusive relationships, and I want bullying, and I want, struggles with weight and health and whatever. I'm gonna be that person. Well, what else? I'm going to use him as a bridge to connect the ancestors and the descendants. And I'm going to write books through him. And yeah, Michael Twitty, I'm going to be him. When I tell kids that, they get a really weird feeling. And some of them are just like, I'm talking about teenagers. They're like, for real? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, and they get quiet. It's hard to make a middle schooler shut the hell up. They get real quiet. And they think about, whoa, I could have, yeah. I knew when I walked through Colonial Williamsburg as a 6-7-year-old child, I was like, also, hey, everybody, we didn't have no daggone little digital devices in front of our faces. It was exciting to go someplace and see somebody make a silver cup or a candle, something out of nothing. Everything we had was from the store. Nobody made anything, and we didn't have little things to fidget with. So when I saw that pheasant and that turkey with all the feathers on it, dead, I didn't have the concept of death yet, on that table, and I saw those people working, the smells and the smoke and the fire and the scents and all of it mixing together, I said, this is my kind of laboratory. This is my kind of space.
When you've written about seeing it it was on TV, right? They had commercials in the 80s.
Yeah, and they were, very saccharine and golden and enticing. And we live for our little road trips, And then, of course, 3 hours felt like 1,000 hours to a 6-year-old. 3 hours in the car. And I remember it was very different. I remember all the horse apples on the ground. And by the way, horse apples, y'all, is not the type of fruit. It's dreck. It's crap. And I remember all those things and going, right? Mental note. And then later on to become the first revolutionary residents of Colonial Williamsburg, to learn from a lot of the elders who are starting to pass from there. I'm just reminded that it's not a game, it's not a joke, it's real. You know, if you're clued in, you're clued in. If you're here and it's just like passing through, that's cool too. If you want nothing to do with it, that's okay. I can see that. I can see why some people would come through this place, this sphere, and really not want anything to do with the big questions.
I mean, it's facing the hardest questions.
Yeah.
But the meaning you make out of that is alchemical. It's transformative. It's life-changing.
And the thing about food is the worst of the temporal things, right?
What do you mean by that?
Because it doesn't last.
Right.
Except for honey. And you had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
That's the bees and God.
Well, we could get really philosophical and say it lasts. It lasts in us.
It lasts. It does last. It lasts. It gives us the energy to reproduce or to teach, or to write things down and pass them on, or pass them down orally and orally. But food is like here and then, here today, gone today, shit today. There's nothing poetic about that. And one time was at the Guggenheim or some other museum, and there was an artist who did the most fascinating piece of art, and it was basically a mechanical version of your digestive system, and it made synthetic poop. And that was the first time I ever thought to myself, "Oh, that's it. That's the answer to it all. Forget 42. The answer is right there. Poop." Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like so weird to think, grandma's cornbread, it's going to be shit. So I guess all I'm doing is redeeming feces is what I should write a cookbook called Redeeming Feces.
Yeah. Full circle.
Full circle.
Oh, man.
Sorry, y'all.
Well, there are so many different places I wanted to go in this conversation, but one I wanted to ask you about was kind of leaning into this time you spent in these historic places, plantations, Monticello, Colonial Williamsburg. Like, what has that taught you about America, the South, food, yourself, and I guess time, because that's a part of it. You're sort of in this place that's designed to represent a specific time in a way, but it's still in this time. It's confusing. It's like, again, the layer cake of time.
When I did a taping with Vice about my work there as a consultant and as a kind of transient person as opposed to an employee, which is a very different life, the first words that Dexter says in the video are a sanitized version of the colonial period. And I didn't feel good about that, even though he's told the truth. I didn't feel good about it because I'm just like, then I realized, oh yeah. And maybe someday somebody will think that about us. That really bothers me, by the way. I wanted to be part of the world where things got better. But we'll leave that alone. I guess it comes down to, they all have different sort of energies. Monticello, James Hemings' energy, and Fannie Hurn and Edith Fawcett, and Ursula. Those are the names of some of the great cooks, black cooks in the spaces.
We're not far from Gage and Tollner, where a famous
right,
black
Edna
cook.
Lewis, not far from Gage and Tollner. So her journey, which, John Birdsall said is a semi-queer, quasi-queer journey, because who was she working with? Who was eating her food? Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote, etc. who helped her get her start in, fashion designers, designers of places at Bergdorf's, and, people who are in the arts, wild. Those food steps matter. Where the food happened, why the food happened, who made the food, all that matters because it is so quick. We could make our own specialty or whatever in this room right now, and then that would be it. Gone out of existence. It's fascinating to go to these places and understand that, this is one of the first places where people enjoyed vanilla ice cream in a casual way. Or, oh, wow. So one time I was at Poplar Forest, which is one of Jefferson's other plantations. And I think I had a freshwater trout or two. I think I had a rabbit and some other stuff. And so they were like, well, what are you going to do with all that? And I said, well, all of these things were mentioned in the archaeological record or the actual rations record or whatever of this space. And one of the things that came to was this knowledge that part of the reason why they packed up and sort of shifted use was because they were no longer able to guarantee that oaks and hickories would keep colonizing the forest space. There's more and more pine, and you couldn't cook with that. You couldn't make buildings out of it. You could make other stuff, but you couldn't cook with it and either to stoke your fire because it would be resinous and give off, right? So you also understand the land is changing. Things are changing around you. Things are not staying the same. You have to work hard. Preservation is hard work. Landscape preservation of foodways and, vineyards. And it's a lot of work to keep things the same.
In quotes.
Yes, in quotes. Because it's not that, because ultimately the bottom line goes, you can't keep those places in a bubble forever. I hate to be all 70s Kansas about it, but it is a dust in the wind situation. And you ask yourself, well, how do people in Africa go through this ritual construct where they bring you back to the beginnings of creation, or even more so, the different Aboriginal tribes in Australia reenacting the dream time? I mean, I would love to have that window on the universe where I could find out what remains and what doesn't, or how you change it to meet the magic of the situation. But I go to these places to be a pilgrim. I go to these places to bless the ancestors and those who made those places foodscape spots for me and others. And I go to those places just because, something? It blows my mind to think, oh, wow, I'm in Ouida. Oh, wow, I'm in Cape Coast. Oh, wow, I'm in Charleston. Oh, wow, I'm in Fort Snelling, a.k.a. Badote. Or, when you first time you go to San Antonio, to Alamo, and you're like, oh, this is it. Or you see that bunch of bricks, and you're like, oh, this is Jamestown. I thought it was going to be, no. This little lonely spot is where things of great consequence happened, and then things of great consequence stopped happening. Williamsburg, ladies and gentlemen, was one of those spots. It was a bunch of ruins and dilapidated buildings that Rockefeller resurrected. It wasn't just sitting there the whole time and everybody's like, huh, wasn't that great? Patrick Henry spoke down the road. No, they literally had to create and then block off. And if I may be honest about it, exile the local black community. Because guess what? Williamsburg in its heyday, as it started off, was 52% black. And another 2% of color. That's Native people, that's non-black people of color, that's mixed people. Europeans that didn't fit into any mold. 54% of color. And if there were billions to, make that spot work in a really authentic way, then you would hire mostly black interpreters. And I'm sure that would make certain people jittery because they just like, oh, yeah, you're going back to the original hood. Yeah. Welcome. This still ain't your damn world. How about that? You know, I'm sure there'd be people who would lose their minds going to that specific space and being like, because, there's a white girl who was in Paris. She was like, oh, I didn't expect to come to Paris and see all these black people. Oh, you didn't? Good luck. It was a space that was predominated by people of color who happened to be of African descent.
In a way, I feel like your being there is giving space for these stories.
Yeah. Always. I almost wish I could give people a tour of recipes for the American South through magically taking them to 20 spots, like transporting like Star Trek. So they can really understand, oh, all this comes from this little pan and this hearth in this moment. Yeah, isn't that magical?
So much happens in the pan.
Yeah. And some of those pans still exist and are still being used, and many others aren't.
I love that cast iron comes from the universe, by the way. This is a side tangent, but like that something as mundane as a cast iron skillet could say so much about the universe. To me, that's like probably one of the most beautiful objects on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A conversation between alloys and metals and earth and liquid and fire and air. I wish I could have been a scientist. The problem
You're doing good work, man.
The problem is the math. It was always the numbers, the math, the organic chemistry, the biological chemistry, the blah blah. Oh no, not for me.
Well, I wanted to finish. Again, I wish I could talk to you for hours because it seems like we could, but I want to finish on the fact that like, I feel like the deeper I got into your work, the more I thought about how, in some sense, what you're doing is its own form of memorial. Mm-hmm. That you're using food and by extension, the sort of historical and interpreter work that you're doing as memorial making. And you're creating vessels of memory through cooking. And in the case of publishing your books through publishing, could you talk about this idea? How do you define and think about memorial? And maybe we can make it full circle and bring it back to that
Sure.
That first question, because memorial and time are intricately connected.
In Yiddish culture, it's called a memorbuch. And these were specifically books that were kept, records of the community that were read on Yom Kippur for the dead, especially the dead who were martyred through pogroms, etc. And sometimes the memoir books contain other details about the community that eventually would prove, for those who found them, absolutely invaluable. We need breadcrumbs, right? We need the little breadcrumbs to lead us back to the trail so we can get away from the witch and the bear and the wolf. We need evidence that we were here. We need evidence that we knew we were here. We need evidence that we knew we were going to still be there. Okay? For me, I hope that one of the legacies of my work, because I have a lot more to do, will be to show people a blueprint for how to keep those breadcrumbs immortal, at least functional enough to make it to the next stop. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200 years from now. Which any other way to think about it is not only mind-boggling, but terrifying. But it's less terrifying when you're the one doing the programming and you got it together. That's power, because you're defining reality for yourself and for others, but doing it in a very gentle, subtle way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got a lot to do.
What's the next thing, if you can say? Like, what's the next big project?
I'm working on 3 projects, actually. One is to make a compendium of every single ingredient that I know of in early African American foodways. Every type of a vegetable and its varietals, croakers, pawpaws, zea mays, suscrophus, Diasporus virginiana. And so people can understand the medicinal uses, the culinary uses. There's no faking the funk. Another one is a project I'm working on is called Father Country. And it's about those European roots of African Americans and connections to particularly the UK and Ireland. Yeah. And then, of course, I got to work on my third part of my trilogy, which would be the LGBTQ part of my journey with food, particularly others. So we got Southern roots, African roots, cooking gene, Blackness. We got kosher soul, Blackness in Judaism and Jewish food, Jewish foods, plural. And then we have this other book I got to write about how queerness affects you in the kitchen, which will, I hope, add more volume to this work. Because I believe in people. I believe in human beings. I believe people are made in B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God Almighty. And I think my work with food is just to show them just how made in that image they are. Yeah.
Michael, thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been fantastic. Mm-hmm.
Extra thanks to our Season 12 presenting sponsor, the high jewelry Maison Van Cleef & Arpels. Since its founding in Paris's Place Vendôme in 1906, Van Cleef & Arpels has developed a distinctive blend of poetry and refinement. With its jewelry and watchmaking collections, the Maison is an invitation to a timeless universe of beauty and harmony. You can discover more at vancleefarpels.com. That's VANCLEEFARPELS.com. And thank you for listening. You can find more episodes of Time Sensitive on our website, timesensitive.fm, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To keep up with our latest time-sensitive episodes and get behind-the-scenes updates, sign up for our newsletter at slowdown.media/newsletter. That's slowdown.media/newsletter. You can follow us on Instagram at slowdown.media. Our theme music was composed by Billy Martin. This episode was produced by Ramon Broza, Olivia Almer, Mimi Hannon, and Johnny Simon.